Greeting my friends, how is it going? This is Zed from Zed Outdoors and I hope you're having an awesome day. So today I have come down to northwest London in my own city to visit a friend of mine, Deborah Schneebeli Morrell. Deborah, how are you doing?
Very well, thanks.
Did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did, well done.
I've been practicing that off camera.
Yeah, not many people do actually first time.
Did I not? Oh, fantastic. The name I was curious off camera, where does that originate from?
It's my husband, Schneebeli is my husband's name and he's Swiss.
Oh, wow.
So actually I'm sort of Swiss by marriage. I've got a Swiss passport, which is very useful with Brexit.
Have you got a hidden vault with loads of money in a Swiss bank account?
Unfortunately, no. We've got a share in some pasture land in the Alps so we can graze some cows if we need to.
That's it. We can make some great Swiss cheese.
Yes.
That's a more valuable commodity than money at the moment, I think.
Yeah.
So me and Deborah have been connected for a while now, primarily online. This is actually the first time we've met in person.
Yeah.
But we have a lot of mutual friends within the spoon carving community.
Of course, yeah.
Now, become a big fan of Deborah's work over the time, and we've spoken quite a bit, and I've heard from mutual friends, obviously her work is outstanding. So we got talking. And I asked Deborah if it would be kind enough for me to come into her abode here in northwest London, her studio, to sit down and document her process from start to finish on how she carves a spoon. Now, you have a bit of an interesting background, but you're quite creative as a profession, haven't you?
Well, I mean, I'm older than a lot of spoon carvers, and I originally went to art school and studied fine art, so I'm a painter. But it's hard to make a living as a painter. I exhibited my work, but I also, alongside that, I wrote lots of craft books. I probably don't know that, but
I didn't know that.
I've written about 30 craft books on
wow.
lots of different materials. So I've always been really familiar with tools and materials and liking to sort of investigate different techniques. So
And how was it you got into spoon carving then?
I had a friend who was just interested in everything that was kind of the now.
Right.
And she was really good at research. And she said, look, Deborah, I think you'd like this. Let's go and do a course, a day course. So she took me to Woodland in Frome, to a little village hall, and we went and did a spoon day with E.J. Osborne.
Oh, wow, yes.
And that was my first introduction. That was probably 4 years ago.
Right.
And I made a spoon which I still use, my porridge spoon. It's got a very deep bowl, like most.
The first one's always your most sentimental.
Yeah, and but I sort of liked it, but I didn't sort of get the bug immediately.
Right.
And it wasn't until probably another 9 months after that I did a course with Barn. And then I began to sort of get it a bit more. And just slowly it built up, really.
Oh, wow. And so now you're finding yourself carving quite a bit then?
I carve every day.
Right.
I carve a spoon a day, at least.
Right.
Which, I'm a bit sort of constipated with spoons now. Cause
Bless. This is just a small selection we're going to be looking at.
They don't go out of the house at the same rate that they come in.
No, it's as I arrived here early this morning, we got talking and looking through the plethora of spoons. Now, I'm saying this with complete humility, and that is, Deborah's work is amazing. There's a couple of things I do really like about your work, and we're going to be covering this as we move into this video, is number one, the different styles that you do. You kind of really experiment, don't you, with...
Yeah, I'm sort of... You're definitely not describing me as a production spoon carver. Right. I'm just too interested in what's possible and what the qualities of the different woods are, and the fact that a spoon is like a very small object with very strict sort of limitations in its size and shape and everything, and within that kind of reduction you get these amazing possibilities, like how many different spoons can you make, how many different ways can you use a handle or decorate a handle, or the bowl shape or the transition between the two. It's just endless, really, and that can be a bit daunting, but it's also quite exciting to discover. And I don't want to just make a spoon and that's my spoon and I'm just going to carry on doing it. I really want to know and find out all the different ways I could make a spoon.
And leading on from that, another thing I've noticed more so spending time with you this morning is you experiment around with a lot of different woods as well, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I probably wouldn't be such an enthusiastic spoon carver if I was just carving one wood.
Mm-hmm.
because I think the discovery of splitting a log and seeing what's inside is brilliant. I mean, even if you were using one wood, you'd always get a difference because of where the wood's grown and how old it is and all that sort of stuff. But I really like finding interesting woods and seeing what they're like, and then some of them are just miraculous, and I want to use them more. Not always because of how they look, but very often because of the kind of qualities that they've got, what they're like to carve, what the finish is like, that kind of thing, really.
And leading on from that, we spoke off camera just as you're watching now, and as you can see from the length of the video, it's a very long video, but that's because it's a very extensive video with covering many different aspects of spoon carving. Now, what we're going to do now, moving into the rest of this video, is you're going to be seeing a timestamp below in the description. If you look on there, there's a particular section of the video you want to jump onto. Just click on the number and it will jump straight to that part of the video. My advice is, if you're watching the first time, try and watch this whole video from start to finish so you can get the maximum benefit from it. But as you're moving forward, you can jump to that particular section. So this is how we're going to move forward into this video with Deborah's kind permission. And that is, first and foremost, we're going to have a look at the styles of spoons that Deborah carves. And this is very important to see obviously what she's capable of. So obviously as you're watching the rest of this video, this is kind of like the experience that she's bringing into this particular tutorial that you're watching. So we're going to look at the styles of spoons first and the myriad of designs that Deborah has carved up until now. We're then going to move on to looking at the same sort of spoons. We're going to look at the different woods, and this is somewhere I've not really covered in a huge amount of detail on my channel up until now, but I'm curious as well to kind of spend some time looking at the different woods, and Deborah sharing her experiences with that, some of the pros and cons, and some useful advice really on working with different woods, some of them very, very niche. So we're going to spend some time on that, and then after that we're going to go straight into carving a spoon. We're going to do the axe work first, and then proceeding onto the knife work, and then obviously the finishing straight after. So just to recap, there is a timestamp below in the description that will take you to that particular section of the video should you wish to jump to that section straight away. And without further ado, with your kind permission, we're now going to move on to a selection of Deborah's work where you can see the different styles that she carves. So Deborah, we have a small selection out of the overall collection of spoons that you've carved. And in hindsight, what we'll do, I think we'll talk about both the design aspect and the type of wood as well, all in one go.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe just start off here. And you want to talk about the kind of first couple of spoons?
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their favourite spoons. I think this one is a bit of a favourite of mine. I think it's just quite successful because of the sweet shape of the bowl. And it might have been the first time I did these little pinches here, and the way the back of the bowl meets the handle. And it's made in Leyland. Well, I used to think it was Leylandii cypress, but actually I now realise it's Lawson cypress. I've got a source of this tree. It's a very, very flexible wood. You can see from this spoon, it's incredibly flexible. You can't do that to most spoons. I really find it an enjoyable wood to carve. It's kind of very biddable. It does what you want. It has a kind of malleability or flexibility that a lot of woods don't have. I mean, these are both radial cuts, so you get this wonderful grain, and this one is a tangential, so you get the lovely rings here. And that's all pretty interesting, I think. This spoon, I think I copied that kind of design in London Plain, which is an interesting wood. It's almost open pored, but it has a lovely ripple in it, which you can see a little bit on there. I think it's used as a veneer. It's called lace wood. There's quite a lot of that in London, as you can imagine. These are probably rather unusual. These are children's spoons, and they're made of climbing rose, which I planted myself 30 years ago. So the actual stem of the rose is about like that. So I can get a couple of spoons out of a piece of stem. This has an amazing quality. There's something about climbing plants that have a very, very strong cellular structure. This one is the same wood, but it's just been baked in the oven. So you get this incredible grain and I don't know if that's the grain or the rays, the medullary rays actually. Oh no, those are the rays there. But it's pretty nice, pretty unusual. I don't think it's very common to get that. Obviously, different woods are my thing. I just absolutely love the discovery of different woods. So here we have holly, beech, spalted sycamore, spalted mulberry and hawthorn. And they've all got such different qualities, so you just do different things with them. I mean, holly is an amazing wood. It's so fine. The grain is so fine. So, I mean, this is a holly spoon. You can do wonderful carving on it, chip carving. This is a baked holly spoon, which is really the best spoon to bake because it doesn't make the wood brittle. You have to just be careful about not leaving it in too long. It can go blacker than this. I mean, this is a holly spoon, which is blacker with a bit of chip carving on the side. It's just such a lovely wood to work with. No good when it's dry. Beech is a great wood. I think actually when I went to my first spoon carving day with Barn, we had beech, and I thought, oh my God, beech is very hard, but it is a lovely wood to carve. And it's different, and it has these lovely flecks in it as well. So that's pretty nice. Mulberry I absolutely love. I mean, this was just in the wood pile. It was not a carving piece. It was for the fire. It was an end of something. But actually, I really like the dark bits in there. But this is mulberry. And the yellow tends to darken to a more kind of tan colour eventually. But it's a beautiful wood. It has these lovely yellow in the middle, and then the sapwood is this paler wood, which is interesting. Now, what did I say that was? Oh, that's blackthorn, the sapwood of blackthorn, or a blackthorn branch that doesn't have the heartwood in it, the dark heartwood. That's a fantastic wood to work because you can't feel it by looking through the camera, but it is incredibly sort of tactile and satiny, the finish of it. This is a new wood. I make these little spoons, pocket spoons, which I think everyone should have. You know, if you go for a takeaway or something, you've got something with you. This one is sycamore, baked for a little bit, because I think it's because it had a knot there. I thought, oh, I'll make that knot look not so obvious, so I baked it for a bit. Elm, which is not finished, but that has a very beautiful grain. And I just rub some clove powder into it, and then I'll do some burnishing on that. That's quite a fun little pocket spoon, a little bit deeper than some of the others. This is my most recent spoon, which is lilac, which is probably one of my favourite woods. It's a little bit like hawthorn to carve, although I have carved lilac a couple of years ago when I wasn't such a good carver, and it was very, very different to this, and I think it was the heartwood. I think that's hawthorn. Hawthorn is obviously, spoon carvers will know, is a favourite wood. And this is something which I've never carved before, which has got the most fantastic medullary rays. That is Mediterranean oak, Quercus ilex, the evergreen oak. That's quite interesting. Obviously, I make big spoons sometimes, and that was a bit of quite old cherry, which had been in the garden for a long time. I can't even remember where it came from, actually. But it's starting to spalt. And when cherry spalts, it has this kind of lovely buttery quality when you carve it. And it has a fantastic quality of grain here, which is very pretty on the bowl. I've talked a little bit about holly. I mean, if you bake it for different times, you get different grades of colour. So it's probably baked at about 180 for about 40 minutes, but I check every 5 or 10 minutes. So I don't really want it to go, I don't want it to go brittle. I mean, that's dark, but it's not brittle. That one's sycamore. In fact, that was a spoon that this very nice guy, Liam Culbertson, who's Australian, stayed with us after he did his great European spoon tour. And he left a lot of blanks because he couldn't get through Australian customs with them. So I actually Just took one of his blanks and recarved it. This is holly. This is a successful spoon. It's very sort of elegant spoon. It's holly unbaked. And the reason I usually bake holly is, well, I like the darkness, but also holly does this thing where it oxidizes to a really dirty grey. But for some reason, this one didn't. And I think it's to do with when it was cut, whether the sap was rising or whether the sap was going down. And obviously, I've got it at exactly the right time. This pink is a mystery wood which was brought to the Tetbury Spoon Club, which I go to. It's a brilliant spoon club. Max Havelaar I think he is a tree surgeon, and he brings wood. And other people at the club bring wood as well. And we thought it was copper beech, but it's obviously not copper beech because it hasn't got any of the beech qualities. It could be one of the prunus, a garden variety of one of the prunus ornamentals, I think. Alder is obviously a favourite wood. It's a very kind of biddable wood. I've usually carved alder. I carve a lot in Switzerland where we go a lot. And I carve alder there, and the alder there is very different from the alder here. It's white alder, and it grows along riverbanks, and it grows in the Alps. So it goes through winters of minus sort of 20 or something. So it's got a different quality. It's a little bit harder, I think, than alder normally is. What else have I got here? I think that's just a birch, actually, which has gone slightly yellowy because it's a bit older. But, that's a variety. I just should say that holly is a brilliant wood to colrose because it's just, I don't know, it's almost like drawing on, I don't know how you could describe it. It just is very exact. There won't be any bleed, into the grain or anything like that. I mean, this is a little holly spoon, but it actually split, and I mended it. It didn't split there, it split down here. It's funny, I mended it with super glue, so it's a keeper, really. But most of my spoons are keeper because I haven't worked out how to sell them yet. Occasionally I do. But they pile up, really. But I think the essence of how I work is it's to do with discovery. I really like to discover a different wood, a different technique. I mean, things like, this little hazel spoon, underneath the bark, there was this lovely purple stain. And so I just left that little bit of cleft on there with a purple stain. I mean, I know people do that. I've seen people do it, but it's interesting. It points you towards what the wood was. I haven't got any spoons here where I've left the bark on. But that's another thing which is quite interesting. It's a kind of nice way of identifying the wood. I mean, that's a lovely, that mulberry's already darkened. You can see where it goes. It goes down a bit in colour. So it doesn't stay that yellow for long. I don't think there's anything you can do to keep it although that one is staying, and I'm wondering if it's because it was dead. This was live, whether this was dead, whether that's actually different. This is a bit darker, isn't it? Yeah, so, I mean, there are many more woods that I've used, but I don't want to take up the whole film going through it.
Oh, but it's fascinating. Like I mentioned earlier on, I really do respect the fact that you play around with different types of wood. It's something I've not done enough of myself. So obviously spending time with you, I'm kind of spurred on now to kind of give that a go and kind of experiment around. But it's just really nice to see obviously the variation of decoration styles and obviously the woods that you use.
Well, I think you've got to keep yourself interested. You've always got to be interested and engaged in what you're doing. I'm not the kind of person that would be always engaged as a production spoon carver or someone who uses all the same wood. So I think it would be very difficult if I was born in another country in far north or far east where you only got a small variety of woods. I think I'd be frustrated and I'd be longing to kind of get people to send me things in the post. But here, because, we've got the kind of woodland stuff, I've got friends with woods, I've got, people I know, tree surgeons, I've got the allotment, the garden. you know, there's always a possibility. And going to different spoon clubs, I mean, I go to the wonderful Tetbury Spoon Club, where people bring woods, and you know, there are tree surgeons and gardeners there, and they bring amazing woods. So I think it's not absolutely my thing. I think there are a fair number of people who use different woods, but I do certainly make a thing of it.
So with your kind permission now, shall we begin the main part of the spoon carving tutorial? And the first step is obviously the axe work. So shall we head over to the axe working station and begin that?
Great, let's do that.
So Deborah, your wood selection for today's tutorial.
Well, you should be able to guess by the bark. I've peeled the outside bit off. It's cherry. And I think somebody very kind brought this when we had our last spoon meeting here. And it's not a fresh cherry, but I don't really mind that. It's a nice wood, and it's got the lovely heartwood and the sapwood there. So I'll try and make a bit of a thing about that.
And your axe that you use as well?
Oh, I love this axe. I mean, it's not one of the kind of Viking type axes. It's just a very simple 500 gram German, East German axe head, which I think was made for export between the wars. And it was my neighbour on the allotment, Mick Rand, found the axe head, has restored it and put the handle on for me. And it's probably the nicest present I've had. I mean, it just feels so right. I don't think I could ever use another axe. You know, I'm just so, you know how tools become an extension of how you are, and this is definitely one of those. Yeah.
So with the shaping then, so your process then for shaping up the billets?
Yeah. Well, shall I just do it?
Yes, go for it.
So I'm going to start on the back, because what I always do my spoons, mainly do them tangentially, so the spoon will come from there. So I'm just going to shape it up into a billet. Obviously, I want to leave some of that the heartwood, because I want that to show in the bowl. I'm just going to... So I'm going to do the bowl at this end. So I tend to work on the back profile first. So this is the back of the bowl. It's almost just to remind me which end the bowl is going to be at this stage. I'm just going to basically make the banana shape. That is the outside shape. Whoops, always different. Dangerous when you get a chip stuck on the axe. Okay, so beginning the shape now. I'm going to take a little bit of this sapwood off, because otherwise you just have a little dark spot in the middle of the bowl, and you might have to go a bit too deep. So I'm just going to take the bark and a bit of the sapwood off. It's a great help having this stand up as well, so you can really rest your billet against something. It's sort of much safer. Okay. Right, I'm now going to decide whether just going to break the fibres at the back of the bowl. Sometimes I cut it with a saw, and that's probably would be much quicker actually. Funnily enough, this actually feels a lot harder than I thought. I still need to go quite a lot further down. I might just take that, make that a bit straighter on the bottom so it stands up better. I'm just going to take something off the side so there's not quite so much to cut out of there. Okay, it's beginning to get there. I still need to come closer in here. Okay, I'm now just going to chop out the this is really the kind of slicing motion, I think, with the axe, which is a little bit different. So it's getting there. Obviously it's still too much wood there. Okay, this is the stage at which I draw. So the most important thing is the central line. I do that by eye. I make these marks. I've got a silly little short ruler here. I need to get a longer one. But you have to have a central line for symmetry and actually more importantly for asymmetry. I mean, it's just makes life so much easier. I never use templates. I don't like the predictability of a template. I mean, obviously it's something you would use if you're going to want to make the same spoon a few times. So basically, it's going to be a bit shorter handle than bowl, I think, anyway. I'm going to come up here, the top of the bowl, and then I just freehand draw. This is the most wonderful pencil, by the way. It's a Derwent sketching pencil, and it's a watercolour pencil, so the dampness in the wood would make the colour much darker, which is great. Okay, so I'm just drawing it freehand. I have a thing about being a bit asymmetric. Some people don't like it. I've got one person that really likes my spoons but really gets annoyed that they're asymmetric, which is a bit weird. So I could have made the bowl. I might make the bowl slightly longer. I can always shorten it. And then from here, I'm going to do a very, very simple handle, just getting larger here. Yeah, I think that probably, yeah. And then I can do stuff like, I can do my little pinches, or I can do this kind of thing, which I'll take out with a knife, not with the axe. I really like drawing. You know, I've done a lot of drawing in my life. I should do more notebook drawing, really. So now my sort of favourite bit of the axe work is actually what I call drawing with the axe. And so basically holding the axe up here and just coming with different kinds of strokes, really, coming into your pencil line and being as exact as you can. I think one of the most important things to know about carving and axe work is to do about grain direction, because you've got to make a hell of a mess of something if you don't understand which way the grain's going. Probably a bit like that on the end. It might be better to cut it off with a saw. I'll just go. As you can get it off. If my axe was a bit sharper, I would do a bit of this slicing with the axe, but it's not sharp enough. The first one of these kind of shoulder bits is always a bit more difficult, but once you've got one, actually this is a little bit high, this block, but it's good when you can rest. I've got a lower one, you can rest that on it and it's very stable. This is the most critical part of it because you don't want to go straight down and slice half the bowl off, which I'm sure everybody has done once. So I always just begin to angle my axe a little bit out, like that here. I think when you first use an axe, you can't imagine that you could be accurate with it. And it does take a lot of practice to make the axe do what you want. I mean, even now it doesn't do it sometimes. Just move this little channel. So that is ready now for the knife, I think. I mean, I could go on, but there's not much point. It'd just be perfectionism, really. I mean, not that it's perfect, but that's ready to put the knife on it.
So Deborah, all relaxed in our chair. The knife work now. So what's your knife of choice?
Well, it varies between the 106, which is this one, the Morrell knife, and the 120, which I've mainly used the 120, but I think I'm trying the 106. But I do a variation of the two. And obviously I have a completely different knife for finishing, which is a wonderful Dave Cockcroft knife, which I love. I mean, it's from a raw blade from Nick Westerman, and then he hones them. So first of all, I'm just going to make the edges much neater with a knife. I think so. I'll just go right up to those pencil lines. Obviously the grain changes where there's a bit of a bulge. And this is the reinforced pull, which is a very useful knife hold. I think I mainly do the thumb and the thumb pivot. That's my sort of favourite. Now I can feel this wood is just really nice. It's not an effort, although it sounds a little bit like one, but it's not. Sometimes things happen when you've, axing out the crank. You can get things like a little bit of either bruising in the wood or, a bit will, this kind of thing. It's not even here, so I'm going to have to cut that all out, but I'll do that after I've done the edge. This is is it called the thumb pull? I can't remember. It's important to have very sharp tools, which I don't always do, but I sharpened them last night. Sharpening is another whole culture that, a lot of people know an awful lot about. I don't think I do know enough, actually, but knife feels okay today. Okay, I think one of the most important things to do, which I've always done, and I noticed when Barn did a video, is the looking. You just can't carve a spoon without looking at it all the time. You really got to make these tiny decisions, and you can't do it by feeling or just working on one part of it. It's all got to be related to how it looks. Foreshortening the handle, looking down the handle, looking the other way gives you a huge indication of how the spoon is going to be. Okay, I'm just going to do this. Making this a little bit nicer. I think this stroke always seems to look rather dangerous because it's so near your thumb pad, this bit of your hand here, that muscle. But it's quite important so you get a nice edge. So at this stage, I'm thinking that the bowl, I have to think of the bowl and the handle all in one line. I'm not thinking I'm just doing the bowl, I'm just thinking, how is all this going to work together? I mean, there'll be much more refining on here. I I've actually got a backwards going handle, which is not particularly what I want, and I probably should have axed it out a bit more here. So I'm just going to take that off with a knife. And that can sort of correct that. There's a nasty little bit there, which is going to make me have to go a bit more. This cut coming down here and having your hand on the side, I often find you can actually get the pad of your thumb caught between the blade and the wood, and I do get little cuts there, which is not very nice. Try not to get one today. Okay, so the sapwood is very often quite different to the heartwood. It has just a really different quality. It's very fine, this, and you can get these little shaves off it. Okay, then I'll just take the middle out as well. It's a little bit more straight now. I don't think I'm going to be able to achieve the little sweep that I wanted to on this one, but I'll have to be satisfied with how it comes out. I do tend to take my spoons quite slim and slender. Obviously that depends on the wood. Some woods are very adaptable to being very thin. Others really don't like it that much. I think cherry's sort of okay. But not all cherry is like other cherry, so you just have to work with the wood you've got. It's, you know, it's unique. This side I always find more difficult to work, doing this shoulder. I have seen people do very funny hand positions to get this so that it's symmetrical with the other side. The heartwood is much harder. You can actually hear it. So I'm really going to have just a small dark bit in the bowl. It's not going to be that big a bit of heartwood in there. I know I should do this knife hold more. I don't know why. I think think you've got to have very strong elbows to do this, and I don't think my elbows are strong enough. So I don't do it as much as perhaps I should. But it's a good one. Still, the bowl is just going to be too deep, but I don't want to lose this heartwood, so I'm going to take the bowl down from the top side, I think, because I don't want to lose too much of this nice contrast.
So is that something you'd encourage more of in terms of when you're working with the wood to utilise, colour changes, contrast?
I think so, but people do that. I mean, especially with cherry. Cherry is, one of these woods where you get the lovely contrast between the heartwood and the sapwood. I mean, mulberry's another one, which is pretty good. Blackthorn. I mean, there are some really poisonous woods as well, like laburnum. Well, I think they're poisonous because I'm a bit frightened of, the seeds are incredibly poisonous. I have carved laburnum, actually. It's got incredibly dark heartwood. But it's either, some woods have really contrasting heartwood and some woods have very contrasting rings, which can be lovely. I mean, the Lawson cypress has beautiful markings in the rings. So, I mean, this is all the kind of rough, getting the shape, really. Okay. This, where you have the knife in the fixed position, I mean, I'm doing it on my lap because you've got the camera on me, but normally I would do it on one side like that. Is a really good knife hold. It was very exciting when I was able to produce curls. I think when you begin, you don't ever manage to produce these wonderful curls. You end up taking off little tiny bits at a time, and it's a real progression when you get to the point where you can actually take longer bits off. I think I haven't quite got there. I think I'm going to have to take that down because it's still looking too deep. So I'm just doing a really simple transition here, but it'll get a bit more interest when I do the little pinches at the neck. Okay, so I think it needs to come I'll probably take some of the bowl out soon because then it's much, okay, some little fault in there. So I really want to get this line coming right down here. It's going to come down a little bit more, I think. But I'm going to take that out there with a spoon knife, and then I can work on the rim a lot better. Let's just do it like this.
what spoon knife are you using?
This is just a Robin Wood wood tool spoon knife, which is very good. I would like to use a scorp because I've got an issue, which I can talk about a bit more when we get lower down into the bowl. You know, where you get where the grain direction changes, and you know, I think a scorp might be quite interesting to avoid that issue. But I think this is a pretty good one. I did inherit a Nick Westerman spoon knife, which I think are the ones that they use at Spoon Club, at Barnes Spoon Club, but I haven't really used it much, so I'm not that familiar with it. And you know, when you get used to a tool, it's then quite difficult to change. I've had to go with a Tucker cam. I think that's a bit of a blokey thing though, it's so big. But I can see how easy it is to take a lot of wood away, and you know, whereas this is taking off much smaller bits. But you've got quite a lot of control with this. I think I would normally, without the camera on me, I'm probably going much slower. Something nice is going to happen in a minute when we get through that bit of paler wood. There we are. Quite a lot of moisture in this wood, although it's been cut for a long time. I think it's just because it's been out in the rain. I often actually put billets in water if I'm not going to use them immediately, and then sometimes if I don't get around to using them, I then put them in the freezer. But the freezer, basically it's just a domestic freezer and it has other things in.
How long do you find the billets in the water typically stay for?
Well, you have to change the water, and they can go a bit manky, can't they? They seem to be okay. I mean, even if you take them out and then put them back again before you're going to use it, it's not quite the same as the natural state of the moisture in the wood when it's fresh cut. I mean, it can't be, because that's a very different thing. But it does make it more easier to work. Okay, so that's my rough. I've roughed it out now, and I really need to probably need to take the sides down a little bit more. So I'll come down here. I often do the two together because it gives a kind of feeling of the spoon where you've got to. And then I'm always looking at it to see that that one can come down a bit more. And then that rim, which obviously will be adjusted, with a slight angled out. the more you cut down like this, the more you alter the shape of the spoon, and I can see it's going a bit longer and thinner, so I'm just going to have a think about that. I don't really have in my mind an idea of what the spoon is going to look like yet. So I'm going to just...
And the knife you're using now?
This is the little finishing knife, but I just go around the inside of the bowl like that, just to draw the shape of the inside of the bowl that I want it to be. And then I'll cut the outside to the inside. I don't really like that straightness there. Okay, so this is a sort of another kind of drawing with a knife sort of thing. Oops. I mean, this is far from finishing, it's just giving me a... I mean, I do a lot of this. Okay. As well as sight, you need to feel as well too. Okay, so at this stage, I'm going to just draw where I think the centre is. I'm just going to push it over a bit because I think it needs to come there. And I'm going to bring this. So I'm going to decide whether I'm going... that line is not quite straight. Whether to do that, which I might do. Okay, so that's definitely not right. So I think doing this is the one thing. Actually, I'm going to do it with a little knife that really begins to make the spoon show its character. This is it's really important very often it's important to twist your wrist so that the actual knife thinks it's going up like that, and that's how you can do those curves. Otherwise you'll get yourself digging in and find out you're taking up too much. Okay, I'm just going to cut in there. I don't know if I've invented that hold, that one where I cross my thumbs. I think I've seen somebody else do it. I find it really useful, that. I might even just do a little bit of cutting in actually there, like we do when we're axing, just to stop it going too far. I mean, the fear is always you take off too much and then you've got to kind of adapt your whole spoon to a mistake, which does happen. I hope it doesn't happen now. I mean, you can refine this, obviously, when the wood is dry. It's very difficult to get a curve without the feathery bits when the wood is not very dry. Okay, so just to bring it down a bit. I'll try anyway. So when you do this, it's this whole thing about, you know, you want narrowness here, you have to have a bit of depth here. Some woods you can coat with less depth and some woods you can't. I hope this will be all right. It's not that deep, but I think it'll be okay. So this is just a brilliant little knife. You can just take little slithers off. And it's very hard to explain this. How do you... I remember Dave Cockcroft trying to explain to me that, you know, one cut one way is just going under the other cut by a kind of micron. You know, you can't even sort of hardly measure it, and then you won't see. But it's very hard to do it when the wood is wet. I'm just going to do this one as well. Also, rather than going straight at it, if you go at it like at an angle, it's easier to cut those feathery bits than it would be if you're straight on. So they're running down the blade in order to cut them off. Anyway, that'll do. That'll do for now, I think. Okay, so let's make this... Now I'm deciding whether I'm going to make it narrow or not. Make it slightly narrower there, not too much. See what happens. Okay, so I'm just going to take the front of this . I really like to be good enough to do, you know, the Adam Hawker facets. It's easy to do facets, but it's not easy to get them really even. I'm more shaping them. I mean, I don't even know if I would do it with facets. I probably will take them all out eventually. I'll leave that for later. Okay. I'm just going to do a slightly rounded back so that we have a kind of little small flat piece on. Oh dear, it's an angry axe mark there. It's a bit unfortunate. just smooth up these sides. Good way of seeing whether they're symmetrical, the handle is symmetrical, is just foreshortening it. There's a lot more to take off on this side. I mean, these are things that people know, but obviously as an artist, I sort of learnt that pretty early on. Yeah, I can also see the handle is not coming out completely straight with the bowl, but never mind, it's... Okay, so to get the back, so that this line here, I'm going to try and get that a little bit more of a curve in it from the top. Without going too far. I just think it makes it a little bit more interesting. And I haven't got so much to play with on this side. But I can always make it a bit narrower and then I can, when it works. Okay, let's get the back. I mean, you can see the symmetry as well on the end. I'm just working my way down the handle now, just because I want to be quite accurate with the thicknesses and everything. And I do burnish my spoons, so the burnishing tool will push in all the kind of undulations, not that there should be many, but that the knife makes. Okay. These lines are quite important, that they kind of match, that this one's got to come. Okay, it's not that way, it's this way. So I'm really conscious of that edge. And it's also got to come in a bit more there. Okay. So these can be nice bits to do, these little, I don't know what you would call them, they're little shaped flutes that go from the edge of the bowl into the keel of the spoon. You can make them pronounced, or you can actually just have a very gentle curve, but I think this wood is actually very nice to carve, and it might be nice to have a couple of them. They don't have to be that pronounced, but it's a sort of knife cut which gives a kind of decoration, but it actually describes the contours as well. So it's, you know, it's not just a decorative thing. That's what you want the spoon to do. It's like the bowl is going into the handle and these are pointing the way. And this is the point at which the grain changes, and you have to be a bit careful here because you don't want any tear out. So a little bit more faceted. Always checking that it's not going to go too thin. It's good when you do this at night, you can hold it up against a light.
Is that when you typically do a lot of your carving?
I'm afraid I do. I sort of sometimes don't start until after I've cooked supper. I mean, I've axed things out in the day, and then I sit in my armchair upstairs and I watch the news and Newsnight, get cross, and then I watch 24 Hours in A&E. So I'm really well educated about medicine. I'm sure there's a few gaps, but
So if I collapse here or now, you'll know what to do.
yeah, I might be good at diagnosing you, yeah. I don't actually, obviously, when I'm carving like this, I can't be watching every single thing, and I certainly don't watch the stitches and the operations. I think it's just because it's on. I know I ought to be kind of more highbrow and listen to podcasts and things, or music. I'm sort of the wrong generation to listen to music. I mean, I always used to listen to music when we put an LP on or had a tape, or even a CD, but now I'm a bit lost, actually. I need someone like you, said, to show me how to download things from Spotify and stuff. I mean, I'm a musician. I play the cello. I love music.
Oh, wow.
But okay. I mean, it's sort of getting to the stage where it would be the faffing around that I have to do to make it as fine as I want it to be, but it's looking okay on that side. So we're going to have another go at the front. I do find I do a lot of adjustments on the bowl shape. I think that if you do a template, perhaps you don't have to do that. But I don't like the predictability of a template. But I suppose if somebody asked me for a family of porridge spoons, I might have to do a template. But I'm not there yet. Okay. So now I'm going to do this much more carefully. It's really nice when you make a spoon out of bent branch because you don't have this grain change in the bowl. You can go all the way through. I can see a little crack developing. I think it's to do with it being dry inside. So that is a bit annoying. I think this is where I'd like a scorp, because rather than just using that bit of the knife it's only on this quarter, you know, that idea that you can go like that I think would be great. I mean, it really is too wet to get a perfect finish here.
So normally, in terms of the finishing colours, would you let it dry overnight? And
Yeah, well, no, sometimes a bit longer, and I put it in a plastic bag and I let it dry for over a few days. It depends. I think cherry is a bit prone to splitting. Sometimes, you know, you can stop that opening up more and it just closes up. But it's definitely too wet. I mean, here's me saying it was actually not a green piece of cherry. It didn't look it when I cut it, but actually it feels it now.
But that transition to the heartwood looks beautiful.
Yeah, that will be lovely, especially when it's dry and when it's oiled. Could be really nice. Okay, so I'm going to take more out of this bit here. And that is mainly, you see, by feeling. Yeah, I think the finishing has got to come when it's dry, because I think you could do a bit more damage. But one thing I will do is just take these in a bit. I might just draw a little. You can really see how feathery it is. So I actually want to see, rather than it going behind there, I want to see that bit. So that's at a different angle. This could drive you mad. It's like sawing the legs off a table to make it level. You know, you end up cutting away too much. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so it's got to come in more.
So obviously a note for the beginners, this kind of neck here, obviously you want to think about rigidity, don't you, in the stone?
Yeah, you don't want to make it too thin. I mean, I think, see, that's not right. What you need to do is make sure it's it's tough because I think the mistakes that you make as a beginner is the bowl's too deep and the neck's too thin. And so one thing it's really hard to eat out of, and the other thing it breaks. And it's just, so if you're going to make it thin, you make an illusion of thinness, which is this, it's actually not going any thinner, but it just looks as if it's thinner just by taking that little chamfer off there. And obviously now I've got to come down here to match the other side. So this is what I mean about faffing around a lot, to try and get it. Actually, for some reason, I can't actually see it that well. Maybe because the light's a little bit too, you know, even or something. I think it'd probably be a little bit silly to do too much finishing when it's in this, when they're in this stage. I'm just going to take that angle down there a bit. Okay, so one nice thing to do with these sorts of things is to continue that chamfer into here. So you really do get a complete connection between the bowl, the neck and the handle. They're all one. They're not separate at all. The chamfer is always at an angle outwards, probably about 45 degrees or maybe a bit less than that. So you try and keep the rim as even as you can, and sometimes you can actually correct that if you've gone too thin. Okay, so I need to come a bit more. And then that leaves a kind of triangle here, which I can neaten off. When it's damp like this, it's very hard to see the sharpness of everything. It needs to, I can't get the sharpness until it's dry, and then I work on it then. But I suppose this is sort of, I'm going to have to leave that fluffiness, I'm afraid. And then I'm just probably going to just cut this. I tend to do it this way. A lot of people, I think, do it that way. I don't know why. I always seem to do it. Just going to make a really simple end to this. I don't think that's probably quite the right knife. When you go from that very fine finishing knife to this, it's a huge difference. This has got a lot more strength behind it. Oh. So I think that, you know, I'm really nearly there. As I can't really do much more because the wood seems to be pretty wet, and it's just doing that feathery stuff, which is kind of a bit frustrating, and you can end up cutting off too much to try and make it work. I mean, I can take a little bit more off the... It's still quite thick for a Schneebeli Morrell spoon. I quite like them to be a bit thinner, not too thin, obviously. You do occasionally see people put little things on Instagram where they've gone through their spoon. But I think if you're feeling your spoon all the time, you're not going to do that. It's if you get distracted by talking or something else. The centre is really much drier than the outside. It's this sapwood that's really moist. So it's really just a matter of thinning it down and kind of trying to be quite even. If you are going to use facets, be even. I mean, you can do long facets, you can do these sorts of facets. I don't really like this transition here. I think that's a little bit too sharp. I'm going to take this down. Doesn't need to be that deep. And then I'm going to make something of this bit here. So I would probably try and just get rid of the... It's awkward because the grain changes right on the edge here. I think it's really time to leave it. I can do this little nice thing at the end here, but otherwise I'm going to leave it because it needs to dry out. There's a little bit of a cut down there, a little split, and I'll have to take that out. But I'm going to take it out when it's dry.
So now with the drying then, so some tips on drying, what do you normally do then?
Well, if it's something like cherry or plum or some of the fruit woods, actually it's hard to know which wood does this. In the winter, you know, if you've been bringing the wood in from the cold and the wet outside and then you carve inside in the warm, there are going to be tensions in the wood that, you know, because of the speed of drying, it can split. A classic place is here. I mean, that can also be related to what happens here when you're cutting out with an axe, but I think I was very careful. I think it's not that. So that might not develop into anything. So I put it in a plastic bag with some shavings, and over a few days I'd open the plastic bag and have a look, and then when I felt it was dry enough, I'd just finish it. It doesn't usually take as long as that, but cherry I think you have to be a bit more careful with.
And then once the the finishing cuts are done, the final drying process, how long would you typically leave that for? Would you do the oiling straight after, or would you let it dry first?
Oh, no. After the finishing cuts are done, then I would burnish it and then I would oil it. It'd be fine.
So with the oiling, what kind of oil do you use?
Walnut oil.
Walnut oil.
Yeah. And I like that because it doesn't really smell. I'm not really one of these oil connoisseurs. I occasionally dip into those conversations on the Facebook spoon carving site. And people get very het up about oil. And, well, I think it was Dave Cockcroft just said he's using hemp seed oil. I hate linseed oil because I just don't like the smell of it and the taste of it. But walnut oil seems to suit me, and I didn't realise it took quite a long time to dry. I thought it dried quite quickly, but anyway, since my spoons are not flying out of the door, it doesn't really matter. So I generally use that, and I don't put a lot of oil on. I don't believe in this whole thing of immersing it in oil and for days. I don't really see the point of that. You need a bit of oil for protection. Also, it makes the grain really show up really nicely, and particularly when you've got something like that kind of grain, it'll deepen amazingly and look really lovely. So I think that, yeah, some people don't oil their spoons, but I think it's nice.
And with the burnishing, finally, would it be okay just to show a quick process in terms of how you burnish?
I've got a spoon here which is dry now. It's not my favourite spoon, but it was an interesting wood. I mean, the spoon bowl's too small and the handle's too big. I mean, I can do a big crit on this spoon, but it's bay, which is an interesting wood. I mean, you'd think it would be as hard as nails, but it's about the easiest thing to carve that there is. So, and I made a big flat handle like that because I'm going to do some coal rosing on it. But just for today's purposes, I'll just show how the burnishing works. This is a burnishing tool that I got from Emmett Van Driescher in America, but you can equally use a pebble or an antler or something like that. This is made of porcelain. And I just rub the corners so that you just take the edge off. I don't want to make it all completely rounded and look as if it's been sanded, but it gives a kind of sheen to the spoon that I don't know how obvious it'll be on this wood, because it's a matter of feeling. I mean, you can definitely see the sheen coming up. Bay is a wood worth really trying to find. I mean, it's very common because it's in people's gardens, because it has the most incredible, it still has it, beautiful smell of bay.
So the process of burnishing, what is it actually doing?
It's just rubbing, you're pressing down on the wood fibres. So where you might have felt a lot of cuts or the little facets from the knife, they sort of disappear. Obviously, you wouldn't want all knife facets to disappear. So if you've got, and you can, I don't want to press it down completely so it looks as if there's no knife has been involved. I think that it closes up all the grain as well. So I would imagine that it would be less likely to pick up dirt and stuff. I mean, some people say it's not worth doing because when you start using a spoon, it changes and it all goes back to how it was. I'm not actually that sure that that's true. So I find it quite satisfying. And then the bowl itself, it feels much nicer actually. The bowl itself is a matter of, and sometimes, you know, these little junction between the edge of the bowl and the rim, you know, if there's any inaccuracy there, I think this actually can deal with that if you put pressure on. If you put a lot of pressure on it, it's a very thin bowl, you might actually split it. So it's a matter of just being a little bit careful. I got this sent from America, and I'm pleased I've got it, but obviously I think it cost $15, which is fine, but then I had to pay some kind of weird customs duty, and then a handling charge, and I ended up like paying, I don't know, 30 quid or something extra.
The customs, and it's not the US's fault, it's when it gets here.
It's here, it's nothing to do with the US, but I feel a bit sorry for the US makers because, you know, And also it's random. Did you know that? It's not on every parcel.
Yeah, for me, I would say about 90% of the stuff I get from the US, yeah, the shipping, the
handling charge.
the
I mean, what the hell
handling.
is that? I mean,
Yeah, it's killer. It's absolutely killer. And the stuff is so good in the US. It's so cheap as well. But yeah, what puts you off is just by the time it gets here.
It puts me off getting things from America, and I feel sorry for the American makers, as well. But do people realise, I don't want to get political, that because of Brexit, we might have that from everywhere. We might have it from Europe, Because I know in Switzerland, if you get a parcel from Europe, there's tax to pay.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
So a lot of people in Switzerland just drive to France or Germany to, buy certain things. It's really horrible.
Saying that Switzerland is quite expensive on its own, isn't it? Very expensive.
It's an expensive country, but they have very high salaries in Switzerland. So it's not so. I suppose it might be expensive for them, and they have much better rent control and things like that. A lot of people rent. There's no stigma attached to it. But it is difficult, for us to say to English friends, "Oh, come and stay," and you go out for a coffee and it's £7 for a coffee. But some things are much cheaper, like drinks. Alcohol's much cheaper, and anyway, it's a beautiful country. You don't need much to buy much. You just go walking. So that has got, although it's a slightly weird spoon, and it's not a spoon I would advertise my spoon carving abilities because it's just a bit odd. But it's just to show that that really works. It's lovely. It's so satiny. It's extraordinary, the difference. So I really rate that. And my spoons are all kind of finished like that, It's not everybody's cup of tea. That's quite an easy one to do. It's a little more difficult if you've got cuts and things, undercuts and pinches and stuff like that. But that's worked quite well.
So there you have it, my friends. That is a wrap for this video. Deborah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This is the first time she's been on video demonstrating, so it was very kind of you to take the time out to allow me into your space.
It's interesting to do it, actually, because it makes you think about what you're doing much
That's right.
more,
That's right. Yeah. No. And you done really well. It was really interesting for me. I filmed a lot of spoon carvers over the years, and it's always fascinating how each and every time everyone has the nuances and changes,
Yeah.
but every carver, including yourself, have ended up with a really beautiful spoon at the end of it. So it's just interesting to obviously get your insights as well, what you're thinking about as you're carving. And kind of what goes into it.
I think it's an interesting process, actually, because when you examine the way you do things in the way that we had to today, it does make you think about, would there be a better way, or how does somebody else do it? I mean, watching the videos that you've done with other people is fascinating.
Yeah, everyone has their kind of... one thing that I've taken away from what you do is, and I say this in a complimentary way, is I think the essence of your carving, you're quite playful with your thing, and I mean that in a way that you're playing with the wood. You're kind of like you're going along with it. You're kind of like you're if that makes sense.
It is. I don't rigidly plan anything.
Yeah,
the spoon comes out as it comes out. Really.
Yeah, so you kind of play. So I mean it in that context that you don't have a preset plan. You're looking at the wood, you're looking at everything, and you're thinking, okay, what can I do with this?
I have a sort of plan if I want to do a little spoon or if I want to do a pocket spoon. But on an eating spoon, it just... Yeah, I think it's more... I find it more interesting. It's just my personality, really. I don't want to repeat.
Right.
Although I want to repeat when it does well, when it goes well, obviously.
But no, once again, thank you so much for showing the entire process.
It's fun, yeah.
And for those of you watching at home, once again, I know this was a very long video, so if you watch all the way up until now, thank you for doing that. As I mentioned at the very beginning, there is a timestamp below this video in the description, so you can use this as a reference video moving forward. And obviously the encouragement from Deborah to yourself is to take what she's shown on this video and for you to incorporate that, be it new, seasoned, or anywhere in between. You could take elements or the entire process from what Deborah has shown in this video. So another thing to mention is I'm going to put 2 other links below in the description. And number 1 is going to be to Deborah's website. So I will put a link to that. It will mean the world to me. You go and check that out. And obviously you can see there up close and personal the individual pieces that she has available to sell. But also you can see an inventory of her work in a lot more kind of up close and personal manner. Secondly, I will put a link to her Instagram down below as well. And Instagram, Deborah is very prolific. She posts quite regularly. Just a great way of seeing what she's doing day to day, because you carve every day.
I carve every day, and I love Instagram. It's like a portfolio online.
Yes,
That's
yeah.
what, it's really interesting. And I love seeing other people's stuff and making friends.
Yeah, I know, including
I've
herself.
got lots of friends, young men. Yeah, it's a very friendly community.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
It's really nice. And like you said earlier, it's a great way of getting inspiration, seeing what other people are doing.
Well,
as
exactly.
Well.
I mean, the thing is that you never stop learning. No. I don't think I'm the finished article. I really like to see other people's work and be inspired by it. And talk to them and know which tools to use. I'm at the stage where I want to upgrade into some other kind of tools and things. So.
And in terms of Instagram as well, if it's with your kind permission, if anyone has any questions,
talk to me.
Talk to Deborah. You could do it by Instagram. Instagram is going to be the best way in which you can do that. So a final recap, a link below to Deborah's website. You can check out more of her work up close and personal. And secondly, an Instagram link down below as well, which obviously you can see a portfolio of her work over time. And obviously you can keep up to date on what she's doing on a day-to-day basis, as well as contact Deborah should you have any questions or queries. So just before we wrap up, is there any final words from your good self?
I don't think so, Zed. I've just had fun. It's been a great day. Thank you.
No, it has been. Thank you.
Yeah.
One thing I actually forgot to say at the very beginning, we would have filmed this outside, but at the time of recording this, we've had, I think, 2 storms now.
Oh yeah,
hit the UK.
It's really wet, rainy.
Yeah.
Because I'm actually an outside country person.
Right.
And here I am in a kind of smart interior. It's a little bit weird actually, but I suppose it's another side of my personality.
Yeah, no, this is it's a really nice space, this actually. But yeah, normally, we film outside. I should have mentioned that at the very beginning. But yeah, it's an extremely blustery day. Even as we look out the window now, it's raining and whatnot.
Yeah, it's horrible actually.
So hence why we filmed inside. So once again, a sincere thank you to yourself, Deborah, for allowing me to share your process with others.
Thank you.
So that others may learn. Hope you enjoyed this video. And once again, links below to everything that I mentioned throughout this video. And until the next time, as always, I hope whatever you're doing, you have a blessed day, a blessed week ahead. From Deborah and myself, Zed Outdoors, peace out.
Oh yeah, peace out.